Hello there, good day and welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, welcome. My name is Oluwato Singh, and to all my returning subscribers, you're also welcome. In today's tutorial, we are going to be learning how to cut and sew this simple yet beautiful and elegant civil wedding dress that you are currently seeing on your screen. We'll be learning how to sew this cut wedding dress from start to finish. This tutorial will be in two parts, and this is the first part. I'll be making this tutorial in two parts because I want it to be as detailed as possible so that anyone that comes across this video can understand it. And I don't want to skip the essential parts that I'm supposed to talk about. And if I'm to put all of this in one video, it will be too lengthy. That is why I'll be splitting this video into two. And this tutorial will not be like part 1 for cutting and part 2 for sewing. This part 1 will contain cutting and sewing, and part 2 will contain cutting and sewing as well. Like I said, I want this video to be so explanatory. If this sounds like what you're interested in, come along with me while we dive right into the video. Right here is the crepe fabric that I used for this project. Then I used this chantilly lace for the yoke and also for the sleeve and for the little drape at the front of the dress. I lined this with cotton lining, and here are the basic measurements that you need to measure on any adult at all to achieve a dress like this. This tutorial will be like freehand cutting. We are not drafting any pattern in this tutorial, and the first thing I did was to bring out my half length. For the half length, I measured a bust and then I added 14 inches allowance. This 14 inches includes all the allowance for sewing, for zip and all of that. I shared this into two, as front and then as back. Then for the length, I did a half length plus 2 inches. This is just me trying to cross check what I did. I cut out the main fabric and then I cut out the lining as well because I'll be cutting both of them at the same time to save time. Now we are going to be cutting the front first. I divided our nipple to nipple by 2, and then I added half-inch allowance. I marked this in 2 to 3 places and I connected this into a straight line. On top of that line, I measured a shoulder to nipple plus half-inch, shoulder to under bust plus half-inch. I marked that, and then I measured 2 inches forward because the person I'm cutting for is not really a busty person. If you are cutting for a busty person, you should measure 2.5. So I measured 2 inches forward and then I drew that line up to under her bust from the whole half length, and I proceeded to drawing her cuff. Then on the cuff, I measured 1 inch forward, 1 inch backward. I marked that and I connected these 2 points back inside the original cuff. At this point, I will not be cutting out the shoulder or the neckline or the armhole. At this point, it is when I'm done joining, padding, joining, then I'll come back to remove my neckline, my shoulder, my armhole. So for the back, it is lot easier than the front. Deep allowance first, 1.5 inch, and then nipple to nipple divided by 2 plus half-inch allowance for joining it back. Then I proceeded to cutting this out. After cutting it out, the next thing to do is to cut out the pencil part of the dress, which is the lower part of the dress. To achieve this, check out for the highest measurement between the waist and the hip. Mostly is the hip. Measure that and add 12 inches allowance. This 12 inches includes allowance for sewing, for turning, for zip, for the slits. All the allowance you need is included in this 12 inch. Fold that into 4, leaving zip allowance of 1.5 inch at the back, just like I did. And for the length, you are going to deduct the half length from the whole length, and you measure that and add 2 inches allowance for turning the lower part of the dress, because this dress will be fully lined. Like, I'm going to turn it down. The next to do is to divide our waistline by 4. Mark that and add 1.5 inch sewing allowance. Then there's something I called first hip. It is basically the skirt waist. I consider it anytime I'm sewing a fitted dress like this. Mark that, divide that by 4, add 1.5 inch sewing allowance. Then our actual hip divided by 4 plus 1.5 insulin allowance. Connect this point together and just proceed to cutting it out. Then the next thing to do is to start cutting your lining. For the lining, I made it 4 inches shorter than the main fabric because, like I said, I added 2 inches allowance. So whatever allowance you've added to the length of the actual fabric, multiply it by 2, and that is how short, like that will be the shortness on the lining. And I cut this lining a little bit wider than the main fabric because my fabric is a little bit stretchy. I know that by the time I'm turning it, this crepe might end up stretching. So I already added 2 inches allowance to the front on the lining and to the back on the lining as well. I hope my explanation is clear. And for the sleeve, I considered an armhole. I added 2 inches allowance. Our armhole is 16. I measured 18. I folded that into 4. I marked out the length of the sleeve, and I'll be cutting for the two sleeves at the same time. And I want the sleeve a little bit longer than the wrist. So I used length of 27 instead of 24, which is a normal long sleeve. And then I divided around sleeve around the wrist by 2. I marked that. I did the same for the three quarter length. I marked that. Then I did the same for the short sleeve length. I marked that. I marked the armhole. I connected these 3 points together. And because it is a little bit bell sleeve, I had to draw the bell part of the sleeve, and I just cut it out. The next thing to do after this is to trim out the front. For armhole, like at the armhole region, the back is always wider than the front. So I had to reduce the first two. The first two now is going to be the part that will fall at the front. The next I did was to start turning. I faced my lining to the right side of the main fabric. I turned the front first. I turned the down, then the two sides, and I brought it out from the up. Now to turn the back, the first thing I did was to measure the half length, and then I figured how long the slit is going to be. Just watch what I'm doing. It is that simple. While your half length is up, fold the down of your dress as if you have already turned it. Then mark how long you want your slit to be. When you are done marking how long you want your slit to be, go back to the waistline and mark how long you want the zip to be on this part of the dress. I hope what I'm trying to say is clear. Now you stitch from where the zip stops to where the slit starts. That's the only place that you'll be sewing. So when you are done sewing, you are stitching on your actual fabric. You open it up like this, and then you will turn the zip side first. Then you stop like 3 inches towards the end, and you use the lining to turn it down. So just push the other side of the back aside, and then you turn it down. While you are doing this, don't let that other side get in the way. When you are done turning it down, you can turn it down before you turn the side, but I just turned the side first before the down. So when you are done turning, go back to the side that you were turning and just finish it up. When you are done with one side, flip to the other side, turn it, and then you bring it out from up, and repeat the same process to the other side of the back. Now, I proceeded to adding interfacing and breast part to my half length, and then I joined it together. I gave it a very good press. I arranged it right side facing right side, and all the joinings are facing one direction. I left the zip allowance at the back. It is now time for me to cut out the shoulder, the armhole, and the neckline, and then the yoke. Actually, the back of this dress, the upper part of this dress at the back, will not have zip. The zip will not extend to that part. It's going to have eyelets and modesty panel. I'm just folding it like this to show you in case you want to add zip to yours. This is how you fold it, leaving the zip allowance at the back. I'm still going to cut out the zip allowance that I added. I'm just using it to illustrate so that you can get the method of when your zip will extend to the half length and when it will not extend to the half length. So the first thing to figure out is the underboss. You can obviously spot it and you know you must know the number. So you put that number at that part where your cup stops and you proceed to measuring upward and downward. So when I measured mine, I measured 17 and the half length I'm working with is 15 plus 1 inch allowance. So I cut out the excess 1 inch allowance that made it 17. It's better for it to be too long and then you cut it out than for it to be short. That was why I added 2 inches allowance to my fabric while I was cutting out the half length. The next thing to do is to, and the back is going to be a little bit longer than the front because I said it to have modesty panel and eyelet. That's why I'm not reducing the length for the back. I'm leaving it at the 17. So the front will be 16 while the back will be 17. So you'll be dividing your shoulder by 2, mark that and then add half inch allowance. The next is to divide the armhole by 2. Armhole is actually 16. I'm supposed to mark 8, but at this point I marked 7. Then you just draw the armhole curve for the bust. I divided it by 4 and then don't let your tape rule be on the exact bust. Just bring it down a bit. Divide your bust by 4. Mark that. Add sewing allowance. I added 1.5 inch in my case. Then a waistline divided by 4 plus 1.5 inch sewing allowance. I cut that out. For the neck, I used neck width of 3 because you can see that it is a turtleneck. It's not supposed to be wide. So I used neck width of 6 on fold of 2. I marked 3 and neck depth of 3 at the front and 1 at the back. They are both round necks. So at first I cut out the neckline for front and back together before proceeding to reducing, like cutting down the front. Then I slanted the shoulder with 1 inch towards the armhole region. If you know your 1 inch, you can just cut it out, but if you're not sure, you should measure before cutting it out. And it is now time for me to eliminate zip allowance. Like I said, the zip will not extend to the half length of my dress. So firstly, I'll be marking the zip allowance that is on this half length. After marking it, I'll just cut it out. And when I'm done doing this, the next thing to do is to cut out the yoke. To cut out the yoke, I marked how long the yoke will be because I'll be cutting out from here and then I'll be placing it on the chantilly that I used as the yoke and cutting it out with half-inch allowance all round. So I marked how long I want the yoke to be and then the shape of the yoke. And for the back, the yoke will be a little bit lower than the front. That's why I'll not be cutting out for front and back at the same time. So I just raised the front up and I added like 1 inch more to the front to the back and I proceeded to cutting it out. I hope my explanation is clear. Like on the armhole side, the yoke could be on the same length, but at the middle of the back, the yoke will be a little bit lower than center front. Like center back will be a little bit lower than center front. Now, since this dress will have eyelet and modesty panel at the back, I have to still reduce the aside the zip allowance that I cut out. I have to still reduce the back panel. That's why I'll be measuring 2 inches up and towards the down I'll be reducing it like half-inch because she doesn't want it snatched. Like she does not want to be snatched at all. She just wants that eyelet and modesty panel effect there. If you're trying to snatch wherever you're sewing this dress for, you should cut out more than this. You can measure like 3.5 or 4 or at the up and then at the down you can measure like 1.5 or 1. So I brought back, I cut it out. I brought back the yoke and I'm just trying to mark this arc that is going to be at the center of the back before using this pattern to cut out my chantilly, which is going to be the actual fabric for the yoke. Next after this is to cut the modesty panel, and to cut the modesty panel I have to be sure of the length and the breadth of it, and this depends on how wide it will cover, like the space it will cover at the back. So So the way I do mine is to arrange the back panel right side facing me. So I'm just going to arrange the two back panels the way it will be when I'm done sewing. And then from each nipple to nipple, like from each princess that where I joined it that, I'll just measure the wideness of the modesty panel, and then from the up I'll leave like 1 inch for turning, and then I'll measure the length of the modesty panel. Just check out how cute and elegant and dignifying this dress is on my bride when I was done sewing it. So this is where I'll be stopping this part 1 for now. The link to part 2 will be down in the description box. As soon as I drop the video, you should check that out. Like, you need to see the part 2. Thank you for watching from the beginning till this point. If you are still here and you've not subscribed, consider subscribing to my channel, and don't just subscribe. Turn on the notification bell so that you get notified when next I upload a new video on this channel. And in case you have any question, don't forget that the comment section down below is always opened to your questions, and I'll see you in my next tutorial. Bye.